So I wanted to bring some of the recent, our year here in America into my Dharma practice a little bit more specifically. And so as we've been listening to a lot of the verbal speech of all that's going on in our political campaign, I was curious to know what kind of impact. I mean, for me personally, I know what the rhetoric and the harsh speech and the divisive speech is doing to my mind, and I've tried very hard to restrain myself and to be very disciplined about how much of that stuff I'm willing to listen to. But what became quite surprising to me is I received some things from the Southern Poverty Law Center in the South, which have been working since 1971 to really counteract a lot of intolerance and hate and bigotry in our country. And one of the things that they do is they give out to like 500,000 teachers and educators in this country free materials to be able to teach children about tolerance and about understanding and about what bigotry is and fairness and such. And they came out with a recent pamphlet really talking about the impact of what this presidential election is having on our school children. Now, this is not across the board, because I spoke with Karen and she's having a little bit different experience. And this is only an unscientific survey that they sent out to 1,000 teachers who do use their materials. And they responded to certain questions. So they wanted to preempt this by saying this is a unscientific survey, but we want to know what's going on in our schools. So here, I just wanted to give a few pieces in there and then bring it into what the Buddha taught about speech. Venerable mentioned it recently in one of her teachings about these 4 qualities that the Buddha recommends that our speech have, and I wanted to go into those a little bit more in detail and how I try to use that in my practice, especially since this past year where the speech has just been so volatile and so unprecedented as far as its effect on people's minds. So first it says here that every student, whether they're preschoolers up through high school, are quite aware of the tone, the rhetoric, the catchphrases of this particular campaign season. Now we got YouTube, we got all of this technology and social media, so even the little children in kindergarten are hearing a lot of this rhetoric. And that they say that they're modeling the behavior of a particular political candidate and bringing very heightened emotions into school. So not just their school books and their backpacks, but they're bringing into the schools these very, these opinions, this rhetoric, these kind of behaviors into the school and actually mimicking them. One of the things that I didn't realize is that close to 1/3 of the students in our American classrooms are children of foreign-born parents. So our diversity as a culture is becoming more multicultural. And that these children this year are scared, stressed, and need of reassurance and support from their teachers. The Muslim children are getting harassed. Even the native-born African-American children whose parents have been in America before the American Revolution are wondering whether they're going to get sent back to Africa. They have nightmares, they have panic attacks, they have meltdowns in class. Students tell teachers that they are worried about deportation, having their families split, being put in jail or attacked by police, losing their homes, seeing their places of worship closed, going into hiding and being sent to detention camps. Most Muslim students think that if a particular candidate becomes president, they will have microchips implanted under their skin. And what's confusing to the students is, first of all, some of the students of color in our country say that perhaps what they're hearing from the white students in their class and all white people, maybe we're finally getting to hear what white people really think about us. That they're disappointed and that it's extremely scary for them to think, well, maybe all of the nice things that white people have been telling us for all of these decades isn't true, that now the real truth is coming out about what they think about us. And that they are confused, that teachers have worked very hard, often successfully, to teach them about American ideals, about freedom, about democracy, about tolerance, about everybody's got an equal shot. They are, according to one Boston high school teacher, confused as to how a person who has no respect for American ideals can be so popular. On one hand, they are taught that the United States is a nation of immigrants, but their current experience says that they feel that they don't belong here and that they have no value in this country. So the entire article basically just shows the findings of this survey, that the children of immigrant families in our country are really struggling. Some of the white children are being quite emboldened by the rhetoric, and so they're using it, mimicking word for word what they're hearing, and calling their schoolmates these words. That the children of color are concerned for the safety of their friends, and they're also equally confused. So I'm really struck once again about how the powerful influence that our speech has on people, and the younger, the more vulnerable we are. And now trying to use this practice not so much as to find fault with what's going on out there, but to then turn the mirror back on myself and to see how much I use my speech as a weapon, how, whether directly or indirectly, consciously or unconsciously, and that my spiritual practice at this point right now is looking very much at my speech and how I use it here in community, how I use it out in the world, and that I turn to the Dharma to help my mind to check up on my speech. And Venerable gave a talk many years ago about, when she was talking about the 10 non-virtues, about the power of our speech and what the 4 qualities are of the Buddha, that he really says, if you have these 4 qualities in your speech, then your speech is virtuous. So I wanted to just talk about maybe the first 2 today and then the second 2 tomorrow. So the first one is that, may your speech be truthful. And of course, the obvious thing is not lying. Are we deliberately saying things that we know are not true as true? Or are we denying things that we know to be true as not true? So that's kind of the basis of lying. And Venerable says this isn't being so rigid in the truth of our speech that we use it in very unskillful ways to say, I'm doing this for your own good, and then use truthful speech to actually harm people. So the criteria for lying is one thing, and then the skillfulness by which we share the truth of what we know is another. How true is our speech when we use the words always, never, all, nobody, no one, everything, and everyone? These words in our speech give us a clue that we are exaggerating. Nobody loves me. My dad is always on my case. I screw up all the time. Nobody believes me. To realize that these are actually lies that we tell ourselves, that they are exaggerations. Another clue to not being truthful is if we're complaining, blaming, or feeling sorry for ourselves. These are, once again, exaggerations of our life experiences that are simply not true. The second one of what the Buddha says is a wonderful quality if you have virtuous speech is that it's useful. Is it useful in the short term? Is it useful, which is the ultimate goal of Buddhahood? How do we use our speech to really promote the qualities, the cause and conditions for ourselves and others to reach the ultimate goal of Buddhahood? And then there's the useful speech that just really helps us to get along and be harmonious in our day-to-day endeavors with each other. So the long term is, of course, the greatest gift is the Dharma. But to be very careful not to be evangelical about it, to drive our friends and families crazy by giving them Dharma advice when it's not asked for, and pressuring them to come to a teaching or reading a book. So as much as the Dharma may be true and real for us, and we're extremely enthused about it, to use our speech in a useful way, which is not to pressure and to guilt trip people and to give them a sense that they're being coerced into listening to us and going to Dharma teachings. Just sharing how the Buddha's teachings have helped us is where we want to go. We want to share our commonalities. Most people who follow spiritual traditions, there's a huge amount of commonalities that put the Dharma and everybody else's beliefs kind of in line. Forgiveness, compassion, ethical conduct, kindness. So there's a lot of places that we can share with our speech that is useful for the long-term goal of people being able to create the causes and conditions to have the mind of bodhicitta, to have the mind of wisdom. The short term is basically everyday help to avoid conflicts, being clear in our communications on, what is it that we want to express? What exactly and specifically do we want people to do for us? What kind of response are we looking for? And that short-term useful speech is being as clear as we can on what it is that we want to communicate and what kind of response do we want to elicit. Being a good listener is a great way to have virtuous speech, is that our listening is a profound way of telling people, I hear you, I'm with you, I understand you, and I support you. That's very helpful. So giving up, once again, we've got divisive speech, giving up the backbiting, the slander. We bring up suspicions and judgments and doubts about people, so we can cause some sort of disharmony in relationships that are already fragile, or trying to cause divisiveness in a relationship or a suspicion in relationships that are good and strong. Driving a wedge or causing friction between other people. This is an extremely nasty form of speech. So we want to make sure that our speech brings harmony and reconciliation and understanding and tolerance. Giving up blaming ourselves and others. This is a huge one. Whenever there's difficulty, either dumping the responsibility totally on ourselves or dumping all the responsibility totally on other people. So our useful speech is to recognize, what am I responsible for? I will state that. And then the rest. Let's talk about what you think your responsibility is. And then this year's election, a lot about idle talk. Why are we talking at all? So this Venerable recommends that we check our motivation when we're getting into hanging out with friends and going to the tea shop and being in groups, is to find out when I'm speaking right now, what is my motivation? If I want to connect and I use ordinary things like the weather and vacations and how's your family and stuff, that's great. But to be very careful how our idle talk goes into just a lot of meaningless carbon dioxide. So these are just two of the ways in which the Buddha has said, if we want our speech to be virtuous, to create the causes and conditions, to have not just the speech of the Buddha in which all beings understand as soon as we open our mouths, the Dharma, but to be able to use it to connect, to be able to use it to encourage and to share the Dharma as we know it. And so I've been really paying attention to my speech this year. I have found myself quite disturbed and upset by what I'm hearing. So rather than going to how awful and how terrible is that, I've been really trying to say, okay, when does your speech get to be like rhetoric? When does it start to be disharmonious? When does it start to be divisive? When are you telling the truth? And when are you speaking to serve yourself and your own interest, exaggerating other people's bad qualities and exaggerating your own good qualities? So I've been using it as quite an internal checkup of my own speech.